All right, good morning. Yeah, these look so comfortable, right? Oh my gosh, like this is an amazing venue. Like I've given talks in movie theaters before, but they're like the typical movie theater. You're like your feet are stuck to the floor. Like this is kind of an interesting experience. But yeah, good morning. My name is Mandi Walls. I'm going to be talking about what I've euphemistically called futuristic luxury incident response. Or you talking about incident response the first thing in the morning. Maybe not your wake up topic, but it'll be great. So let me make sure my thing works. Maybe it doesn't. It's beeping at me. Come on, man. Are we going to do it? You're going to do it. There it goes. All right, so there's me. I work for PagerDuty. I am on all of the socials, the bird one, the pictures one, the sky one, at LNXCHK if you'd like to get in touch with me. If you're old school, just want to drop me an email, I'm mwalls@pagerduty.com. I'm not going to talk about our product today. If you want to talk product, find me later and we can totally do that, or drop me a line and I'm happy to chat about whatever. I'm going to talk about incident response. And I want to call it a practice, right, as something that you work on intentionally, because incident response doesn't happen organically, right? When something goes wrong, something's high stress, people have this like fight or flight kind of response. Neither one of those things is debug complex microservices environments, right? That doesn't fall into either of those categories. So in order to put together what your process should be for incident response, it has to be very intentional and very specific for your organization, but a lot can go wrong in all of the pieces that happen there. So we want to talk about deconstructing what happens during incident response, what the bad stuff looks like, and then how we can improve it and how the industry is going to change it going forward a little bit. So your incident response process may be broken. You may not have one at all. And for other folks, they're like, what do you mean you don't have one? We've had one for years. It's totally possible. There's still plenty of folks out there who we've kind of admitted that you're not going to get 5 nines of reliability out of every possible service that you have. But saying, oh, we can't avoid incidents kind of sets some folks up for desperation. They're like, well, why do we even try? Let's just trash it all and it'd be garbage, it'd be fine, right? So they go the entire opposite direction with that. Other folks have these all hands on deck, everyone must have an absolute crazy time kind of incident response processes. Those are also incredibly wasteful. You spend a lot of resources not knowing what's going on and just having a lot of people having a party on an incident call. We also see a lot of folks who over escalate or over prioritize things that don't need to be a major problem. I know you love your service, it's your baby. Not everyone thinks your baby is the most important service in the ecosystem. So maybe chill out a little bit about it. And we also see a lot in microservices environments where your organization mirrors that environment, and you've got 400 developers on 2 pizza teams. So 400 divided by 6 is way too many engineering teams to know exactly who owns what at any given time. And having that kind of explicit accountability, explicit responsibility is an act of hygiene more than anything else, because everybody loves a reorg. But you reorg on Tuesday, and by Wednesday, no one knows who owns what or who to call when there's a problem. So there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up and maintained. So why is this a topic for SREs, right? Or for folks whose remit in their organization is really about reliability? Incidents impact your reliability. That uptime that you're after, that customer experience that we all want to deliver, is super important for the overall reliability of our systems. So SREs are uniquely positioned, I feel, to put together the guidelines, the recommendations, all of the things that your application development teams should be working on to keep their services aligned and reliable. We also have all this work that has to happen in advance. putting together your recommended practices, setting up your guidelines, making sure all those little tiny 2 pizza teams are set up effectively is part of producing your golden path, producing your road to success that SRE is often put together. So you have all the guidance, constraints, all of these things that we want to set up and have in place before anybody's code gets to production, right? So service ownership and reliability go hand in hand. And I've mentioned a couple times already, microservices environments can cause a lot of confusion. We're all done with the monolith. Like, I totally get it. I lived in monolith land for a long time. I still have nightmares about like how much code can live in one particular application. And you're like, oh, we're going to divide it up by URL. And like, why do we have to do that? But that was the way the monolith lived. And being able to manage your environment complexity, your organizational complexity, especially when it comes time to say, oh, we're having an issue on this particular service. How is it impacting everything else in the ecosystem? How does it touch all these other components in the constellation? And that's really hard to know just organically, right? Like, it's hard to reason about large, complex microservices environments. You have to lean on your tools to help you maintain those relationships and know where things are. Part of that comes in with the way we deconstruct our stack. Who's responsible for what? Your application team, what's their horizon of responsibility? What do you actually give them to be responsible for from a reliability standpoint? They have their code, they might have some libraries, they have their runtimes, and then once it starts to touch the operating system, like, and there's a problem at that layer, who gets called? And then you have your cloud infrastructure or your pods or whatever you've got underneath there, who's responsible for that stuff? So you end up shipping your organization almost, it's hard to avoid doing that when you get into those kinds of environments. So we want to help teams put their relationships together so that they know what they're responsible for, how their reliability impacts everyone else, rather than allowing them to have this sort of concept of, I kind of think of it as micro reliability. Like, I have this tiny little service and it only has to do this tiny little thing, so it only has to have this kind of reliability. But if that thing is a key node in your network of the ecosystem, like, it being bad is going to cause a lot of problems for everybody else. And all that stuff has to be sort of evangelized internally so that folks know what they need to do. So when we think about what happens during an incident, the entire workflow that we go through, some folks will get it down really easily. They'll kind of it becomes almost second nature to them. Other folks will really struggle. I've worked with a lot of folks who kind of freak out and don't have a lot of ability to sort of step back and take it sort of not personally when there's a problem. So we kind of deconstruct the workflow into some steps so that we can sort of talk about what bad looks like and then where we can go to get better. So if we start with where we are now, we start with alerts, right? And we've been talking about improving alerts for a number of years at this point. Folks know, you've heard the term alert fatigue. There are too many alerts, the wrong kinds of alerts, alerts that are garbage. They're just like, there was a problem. Thanks. That's really helpful. That's great. We also have lots of places where alerts aren't actionable. They just kind of come in and you can't do anything about them. And all that is just noise in the environment. It's not super helpful. We get to the next phase, notifications. Often teams are notifying the wrong people. They don't know who to notify, or they notify one particular person because they know that person's always going to pick up the Slack or they're going to pick up their phone or whatever. I've been on the receiving end of that, working with a knock in the past. Or like, oh, we can't get hold of Ben, so let's call Mandi. It doesn't matter that Mandi's in a different organization. She might know. Thanks, it's Thanksgiving, but like whatever. So you can also notify too many people. Lots of organizations love this. Every incident is a party. And you join the call and there's like 250 people logged in and you're like, who are all these people? Like, what is this a really big problem? Because I just thought it was like this one thing. Like, everybody in the org is on the call. Not necessary. You don't have to do that, right? We get to triage. We see a lot of folks fumbling around. Again, fight or flight is not debug complex microservices environments. And folks are stressed out. So your triage gets to be time consuming. There's a lot of complexity there, dealing with permissions, dealing with who's allowed to log into production. This is a place where there's a lot of really great products finally emerging to allow for additional access, just in time kind of thing. So a lot of great stuff going on there. Folks also suffer from outdated run books, because who loves to write a run book? I love writing run books. Oh yeah, which command actually worked? Yeah, it wasn't that one. So there's a lot of suffering from that. We get to mobilization. This is another place where your service ownership comes into play. We might have like a little loop here. We're triaging and mobilizing. Oh, that didn't work. It looks like it's somebody else's problem. Let's call them. And we just kind of go in this loop. But how do we know? How do I know who owns that, right? And then those folks might have inconsistent notification methods. I'm an incident commander for PagerDuty, and I have been on calls where we're like, well, there's a problem on this service and the customers notice, but that team doesn't actually have an on-call rotation. You're like, it's in production and customers can see it and there's no on-call rotation. Like, who are we? What does our team do? Whatever. So putting those together, making sure they're all consistent, super helpful. We also see teams that aren't able to resolve their own incidents. Are you allowed to roll back the push that caused the problem without escalating to your director? Are you allowed to roll forward? Same thing, without escalating to management, director, whatever. Lots of folks aren't, so that it takes additional time, means more people need to be notified, things keep rolling. And then we get to prevention. Who immediately prioritizes prevention work if it needs to go into the application backlog? One dude down here. Y'all, the rest of you, you know this doesn't happen, right? It never gets fixed. If it even gets onto the board, that's like a prayer answered. My friend J. Paul Reed just wrote 3 articles about this on his Medium blog, and we're going to have him on our podcast in October to talk about this, because we know we have this prevention work to get done, these operational features rather than non-customer features. That stuff never gets prioritized. The other feature work gets prioritized. So we know that poor incident response practices lead to poor results in lots of different ways. Organizationally, we found over the time, the last couple of years, we've been doing research on this. Having bad incident response, paging people too often, waking them up overnight, leads to team burnout. Folks leave. It leads to attrition. It leads to bad retention, bad employee engagement, has a lot of negative impact on teams that end up being on call and having bad IR practices. From the standpoint of what your customers think, like if they notice, right? And that can have financial implications. It can have brand implications, and can impact your reputation. Both of these things make it hard to hire, can make it hard to raise funds if you're in that model, can have impact on stock price and those kinds of things as well. No one wants to be the incident that ends up on the front page of the Financial Times. So what can incident response look like? What's this futuristic version of this that we're headed to, right? We want to look for fewer interruptions. We want them to be meaningful and actually need human beings. We want less waking up. We want less being pulled away from kids' birthday parties, being pulled away from your holidays, those important things that we want. And more time to just get stuff done rather than fiddling around with little BS incidents. So we're going to take stock of all our processes and see where we can improve them and where things are going to get pushed in the future. So looking at alerting, this is an easy one to tackle, but probably the one that's the most work for a lot of teams, right? Just taking stock of your alerts, what they look like and where they are, right? We see a lot of folks who have really jargony alerts, right? I'll be working on a question someone put into our forums, and they'll send in like this gigantic JSON document of the alert they're sending to us. And I'm like, what is this? It means nothing. So the junior admin on your team doesn't know what it is either, right? You're just dumping whatever nonsense out of the application. So as we minimize that, we get more understanding across more teams. That's going to help us improve our response time. So we can align to common language, and this is a good place for SRE folks to start putting together guidelines and better practices for all of your application teams. If you actually mean this back-end thing is slow, say in the alert, this back-end thing is slow, right? Be explicit about what is there. Also, be really aggressive about reprioritization. How many are using SLOs? Okay, we're finally getting more hands. Oh my gosh, I ask this all the time. So setting the correct priority as a reflection of the impact of customer experience via your SLOs, super important. Lots of folks still not doing that. You should be, right? That's a whole other talk. But also lowering that priority of non-essential services. If y'all don't need to be up in the middle of the night because nobody's using the thing, don't get up in the middle of the night, right? This is a place where machine learning is coming for your stuff. It's one of the few places across our industry where there is enough data to train machine learning models. There's a big enough corpus to start working through all of that stuff, right? Lots of other places, like the machine learning is never going to figure out what weird SSH client you're using. So like, there's a lot of data here. As you improve the data that's going into these models, whatever service you're using to help you manage them is going to improve its learning as you smooth out that language. So you'll get more benefit out of the machine learning models, out of the AI, if you're not dumping garbage into them, right? So we want to work on that. After alerting, I'm going to inject automation, because we really should be, before we even get to humans, put some automation in this. We're going to rub a little automation on this today. So automation should be your first responder. Over the last couple of years, we looked at our data for incidents across our systems, right? And the way that customer incidents are going, something like 20 to 30% of them, an alert comes in, it generates an incident, it's our jargon, right? And a human being is notified. Sometime in the 5 minutes after that notification, that alert is resolved. Now, 5 minutes is not deep triage. It's not trying to figure out what's wrong. 5 minutes is it either resolved itself on its own and you had no business notifying that human being, or your responder's like, I know what this is, this alerts all the time, we just fix it, right? Waste of time, absolutely. All that stuff should be automated. We want to give our automation time to run, so we step back. Not everything is an emergency needs a human being, first thing. Need an automation to get it to go. And you let the automation fail over or escalate to human beings. Human beings are good at lateral thinking. They're good at novelty. They're good at, like, I've never seen this before, but let's trace it down based on what we've seen in the past. Machines, not there yet, right? So we want to save our humans for the things that we need them for. And if we need to know what happened, just create a metric for it. The automation rebooted this problematic service 6 times today. That's great. Is that more or less than yesterday? And you can work from there. But you don't need a human to go in and restart the service. Triage as well. Eventually, we should be getting to the point where if I'm going to mobilize a human response, all of the telemetry should be in the communication point when I get there. Logs, graphs, error messages, whatever it is. I want that in the channel before I get there as part of the incident kicking off. All of that information. You think of like a Minority Report or like some kind of VR thing where I have all my charts and graphs and I just walk in and like can see what's going on without every person coming in and digging in and say, hey, what's the Datadog link? Who's got the link to that graph? Like, no, that wastes time. Let's get it in there when we're ready. When we get to notification and mobilization, this is just hygiene. It's brushing your teeth. It's maintaining your service architecture, maintaining your organizational architecture, knowing who owns what on any given day. Additionally, incident, not a party. So all of your stakeholders, all the folks who aren't active in the resolution of the incident should be notified out of band. Kat's going to talk more about that stuff tomorrow. When we look at our post-incident reviews, this is another good place where your machine learning and AI models are going to come in and give you a big hand, right? Because when we mobilize a major incident at PagerDuty, we have a Zoom call with no transcript. We have a Slack channel with all the transcript. Plus we have a scribe who is in there putting in the main points as well. So we have all this stuff to collect up and then put into a flow, right? What happened when? That's a lot of work to do manually. We're going to throw that stuff somewhere else and let the machine take care of putting all the timestamps together. And then we can go back through and editorialize, clean it up, make sure all the names are right, make sure all the commands are right. But let the machine do all the hard part there, right? Plus the population of any kind of tickets, artifacts, all of those things that you don't want to forget, but they're a lot of work, especially after a major incident, because you might have a public postmortem that you're going to publish. You have updates that went to your status page. You might have put stuff out on social media. You want to make sure all of those places are cleaned up and ready to go. All of that should be automated. And when we finally get to resolution and hopefully someday, yes, please, prevention, this is where our SREs can step in and say, we want to empower the application teams to be able to roll back effectively, roll forward efficiently, without escalation, without needing a lot of permission. When folks know the impact of their services on customer experience, on their public reliability of all their services, then you can do that. But that is an evangelization process internally to make sure folks understand, so that they can then be able to put all those things together without asking for help, without asking for permission. We want to empower folks to resolve their own incidents and preserve the customer experience. So what can be done? If you don't have an incident response practice, start somewhere. We have lots of resources that are open source and available on our website. We would love to help you put all that stuff together. If you're in a place where you have some stuff and you have some teams do it really well and some teams are really hesitant to even try, like that's part of our role as site reliability folks, to spread that reliability out for every team so that everyone is able to take advantage of these good practices. Because like I said, they're not organic. They don't happen magically. They happen intentionally. So we have to be very specific, explicit, intentional about what we expect folks to be able to do when they do have an incident in production. So we always want to make doing things the right way the easiest way forward for how they need to manage their systems. If they want to try and go off the path, it should be very hard, right? There should be like dragons there and barbed wire and maybe a moat and flames so that they don't go off the golden path. So everything that you're putting together for them in terms of here's what your metrics should be, here's what your images are in your cloud, here's the containers you're going to be using in your Kubernetes, whatever those are, the next thing in the list is here's how we manage our incidents. Here's how you get your stuff working in production, and here's what to do when it doesn't work, right? And there's lots of places for other tooling here. There's lots of opportunity for things like chaos engineering practices and working through incident response as a workflow that are super helpful for your application teams. That has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just grow up on its own. It has to be planted explicitly. So we're here to help. Like I said, I'm happy to talk product stuff later. We have lots of resources online if you want to get started on your own. We have this whole open source ops guide at response.pagerduty.com, which is a distillation of what we currently do, mostly that we've documented for folks. We recently just added like crisis response to this. So there's like brand new content up there for folks. If you're also managing like facilities and data centers and you have folks you're responsible for who might need that kind of stuff for natural disasters, and all that kind of stuff is there as well. If you just want to try it out, I would love to have you sign up for a trial. That'd be great. But take advantage of all of our documentation first as well. So I hope you have a great rest of the day. I hope you're still awake. Like, these are so comfy. Oh my gosh. So thanks very much, and have a great couple days.
Do we have any questions to Mandi? Okay.
Great talk, Mandi. I have a question. I I saw a slide which mentioned AI in incident response. I would be interested in knowing what are the recent developments that improves the existing incident response.
Yeah, so we're working on a couple of things, and this is where I said I wasn't going to talk product, right? But a couple of places where we're incorporating AI. We do have a machine learning model that runs in our alerts engine. So there's already what we call alert grouping there that does some of these things. It takes some work, honestly. Like it's because of the way your data is structured, because of the different sources that things come in, like it takes some work and some tuning to get that to be as smooth as you want it to be, right? It doesn't work right out of the box. It takes some training. So that's the caveat there. The other place we are working on is automatically generated postmortems in our platform. So as you're publishing updates, as you're putting notes into an incident, if you've used PagerDuty, those are familiar, hopefully, it will add those to your postmortem report, and that document will be right there in the platform as soon as you resolve the incident. So that is, I think, releasing sometime soon, GA. And then the other place on the automation side, PagerDuty bought Rundeck in 2020. Who knows Rundeck? Old school, yes, my people. So automate our AI is coming for that as well. So there's some AI generated automation that will be living inside that side of the platform, where you want to say, hey, I want a script that's going to help me do XYZ in Kafka, and it's going to go out and ask its favorite AI tool. I'm not sure what engine they're using behind there. And it's going to give you a sample of here's how you would do this with Kafka. So it's going to help you get started with those kinds of debugging and automation tools based off of what it finds in the AI tool. So those are our three first points where we're bringing stuff in. I know some of the other folks in our space are doing other components a little bit differently. So if you're using a different tool, check that out. I'm sure you've been inundated with their marketing because AI is everything right now. Anything else?
Okay, thank you. Another question. You mentioned we should have common diagnostic in the triage state. Common diagnostic at the triage state. I was curious, what were you suggesting? Were you suggesting that we should have automated runbook for each services so that we automatically get all the monitoring when we are in the triage state before we start looking for one? Like, could you expand on that, the common diagnostic point that you mentioned?
Yeah, like that would be great, right? Like if you're in a place where a lot of your application teams are running very similar platforms, right? They don't need to be deviating and writing their own stuff. Like you can give them that, right? Here's what we do for everyone running this thing in Elixir. Here's what we do for everyone running this Kafka thing. Here's what we do for our databases. Like that stuff can actually come from SRE teams to be able to say, here's what you need when you get to production. So that everyone is bringing along the same set of diagnostics, at least the same baseline, instead of magicking up all that stuff themselves. And we've seen this just recently. We had a feature go out, and they weren't even monitoring for 500 errors. And I'm like, yo, dog, I work in DevRel. Like, I know you need a 500 monitor on that thing. So that kind of just baseline stuff that you can give everybody, whether it's system diagnostics, application diagnostics, locations for their logs, whether you're collecting those up or not, where they need to go. Even the language for logs, like we still see a lot of folks are just like, there was an issue, the thing is slow, still waiting, yada, yada. Like take your debugging out of there and put very formal language into all of those logs so it's very explicit. And for alerts, same sort of thing. Like there's a lot of services that'll come out of like your Prometheus or whatever, and it'll have this huge, long JSON document. And only the most experienced admin of that system will have any idea what any of that means. So you want to do the translation beforehand, before the alert gets in there, so that if your most junior person is the on-call that day and they get that alert, they don't have to call you to translate what that alert actually means.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so while we plug in the next speaker, Alicia, Piotr, could you take care of that? I think we've got one more question. Where was that? Oh, there we go.
Thank you. My question is, we did dynamic reteaming, and then we have a value stream. In that value stream, we have different teams, right? We have a stream align team, we have platform, we have enabling team. But each time there's an alert, it's always the stream align team that gets caution, like, hey, what's going on? And everybody turns eyes on the stream align team, even if it's an issue that's going on with the platform team. So you spoke about ownership. My question is, we've been struggling to see how this alerts could be directed to the right team in charge. How do we define ownership? How do we get leadership to understand that different teams are involved for this application to be running? We're really struggling. Thank you.
Yeah, and we do too, right? And part of that is knowing where the telemetry is coming from and assigning that to the right team. Like, we use PagerDuty, so you set up a service that then the escalation policy goes to the platform team, and certain alerts come in and it says, oh, this looks like it's an issue on the platform layer, so it goes to the platform team. This alert comes in and like, oh, this looks like it's application based, and it goes to the application team. And you can do a lot of logic based on that. So that's a combination of tools and organizational stuff, just to make sure that everyone who's pushing alerts in knows where their alerts are supposed to go, and being able to say, this is one big logical service, but inside it is all these layers that need to go to different places, and deconstructing every alert that comes in to be able to say, this belongs to platform, this belongs to application. And we can talk more about that if you'd like to.